Hello everyone and welcome to Bacon. Also, welcome back to Cinderella Phenomenon. We are going into Chapter 7, Be Careful What You Wish For. Rod's Route. Today's the first time that I am leaving the palace on a day off. Usually I choose to stay inside. Whereas the other servants always leave to go home, I never see any reason to leave since this has always been my home. Aww. And the Marchant has never been home. Besides, it's not as if I want to return, not after that conversation we all shared last night. Thus, I've spent most of my days asking questions about Mother's reign, inquiring when and where I can. The opinions do not surprise me. I was so scared of her. One wrong move and she'd have you thrown in prison. The townsfolk would always wait for her to pass by before leaving their houses. She was a tyrant. The kingdom is a better place now that she's gone. There's no reason for them to lie to me. The more I hear, the more my old life makes more sense. I now know why the king never seemed to love my mother, and why the people hated her. And the reason people looked at me with such fear. However, it has been months since I have been glared at in public. If there is one good thing that this curse did for me, it is that it always allows me to travel around town without being noticed. As Viorica's shop comes into view, my thoughts shift to the reason I have left the palace in the first place. If Rod will not tell me anything, I will have to ask Viorica. She must be related in some way to this curse. I pause outside the door to the toy shop. With a deep breath, I push the door open. Welcome. The moment she sees me, her expression becomes confused. Oh, you are the princess's maid. Lucette, wasn't it? I nod at her. You've never come in here alone before. What can I help you with? I wanted to ask you something. It is about Prince Rod. Prince Rod? Did something happen to him? Is he okay? He is fine. She sighs with relief. Then what is it you would like to ask? I just wanted to know if you knew anything about Prince Rod's son Mutinous. Viorica stares at me for a few moments before she shakes her head. I only know that it happened soon after I met my fiancé, Desmond. What reason do you have for asking? Well, I try to think of a plausible explanation for this, and I immediately consider Emmeline. Viorica is Emmeline's best friend. Surely she would be willing to help if she knew I was doing this for Emmeline. Prince Rod has been very quiet recently. Princess Emmeline has been worried sick about him, but he refuses to say anything, even to her. I have been trying to gather information that might be helpful in discerning the cause. I stare at her expectantly, hoping that my gaze holds nothing but determination. Finally, Viorica smiles. She's lucky to have a dedicated friend like you. I am not still accustomed to the fact that Emmeline considers me a friend. Before she became the princess, I was her first confidant. We were like sisters. But now that she's living in the castle, we no longer have the luxury of spending so much time together. I worry about her constantly. Even around me, Em always tended to keep her problems to herself at first. She doesn't like to bother other people with them. It is not hard to agree. With the way Emmeline always smiles before, I never thought she had any problems in her life. It's like I said before, it's usually the people who seem the happiest who often have the most issues, and are often usually willing to take on other people's issues before tackling their own. It was only recently that I discovered that she was hiding all her loneliness and pain behind a smile. It's a relief that she's befriended someone who cares so much about her. I don't know if I can be of much help, but I'll tell you what I know if it will help Emmeline. To start with, I'm not exactly sure how everything changed, but it happened so suddenly. All I know is that after the night I met Desmond, our relationship changed. At first he smiled, but recently he's been avoiding me. What happened between the two of you the night you met your fiancé? Nothing. Rod and I did not meet on that day. Prince Rod wasn't there? No, but soon after what happened that night, Rod grew distant. What happened? It was a stormy night and I was heading back home. I took the route by the riverbank because it was the shortest route. It was foolish of me. The road was slippery and full of mud. I lost my footing and fell into the water. The waves were strong and I was certain I was going to drown. I don't remember what happened in the darkness of that water, only that when I woke up my head was in Desmond's lap. That was the first time we met, but not the last. He carried me home and he came by every day as I was recovering. And then he came to visit even after I had recovered. I try not to get my hopes up too much, because what could this nobleman see in me, a mere commoner? But I still ended up falling in love with him. You have no idea how happy I was when he said he loved me too. It was a dream come true. So he kind of did what the Little Mermaid did and saved her from drowning like the prince was saved from drowning. And that's why she fell in love with him and left Rod behind. Okay. Of course, every girl dreams of marrying a prince. It was in all the fairy tales that I read as a child. None of that was at all related to Rod. How does this relate to his curse? You said your relationship with Prince Rod changed after that night. What happened? Viorica sighs. I told Em and Rod about Desmond soon after the incident, and was happy that the two of us had fallen in love, but Rod didn't say much of anything. That's when I noticed he started growing distant, and when I realized that he had also lost his voice. He still won't tell me anything, but I figured that he was... Her voice fades, but I know that she's referring to the curse. So Rod lost his voice shortly after Viorica met Desmond. The mermaid's curse must have something to do with the tail. The little mermaid traded her voice for legs so that she could be with the prince. But that night, the only person who found their Prince Charming was Viorica. Rod's curse must have something to do with Desmond and Viorica. He became distant with her after finding out about Desmond. Why? Then there is the fact that he still spoke to Viorica even if he was distant. It was only when he found out about their wedding that he became so cold. I frown as I try to organize my thoughts. How did it get to be this late? I'm so sorry, Lucette, but I have to close the shop now. Sorry for the story. I know it has nothing to do with Rod, but it was after that incident that he began to act strangely. I don't think it was much help, but I shake my head. You have told me what you could. Viorica walks me to the door, opening it so that the both of us can step onto the street together. I really hope that you're able to help Emmeline and Rod. I hope so too. Did you see Ophelia the other day? I catch sight of two noblewomen sitting on a bench together and not too far away from the toy shop. They were referring to Ophelia without her title. How disrespectful. Who would have thought a peasant like her could almost look like royalty? But her dress. As the queen, she ought to be wearing silks rather than satin. She can wear whatever she damn well wants to, whatever's comfortable for her, because she's the friggin' queen, ladies. I do not know why, but I bristle at their comments. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, but the fact that they are speaking so bluntly in public means that they have little worry of being overheard. I'm still not sure what the king saw in her. Oh, you know what they say about ladies lacking natural beauty. Her talents must lie in other more persuasive areas. She must be very persuasive indeed if the king saw it worthwhile to marry her. I am still having issues with my voice here. As the two women laugh, I feel something hot begin to burn my stomach. Viorica takes in a sharp breath beside me. Since I became a maid in the palace, Ophelia has been nothing but kind to me, a mere servant. She has all the right to flaunt her status entirely, she remains humble. I now know that this is why everyone at the palace loves her. A common woman like her can only keep a man's attention for so long. I start walking toward them without thinking. Lucette, You have no right to say those things about the queen. The two women are clearly surprised at my interruption. Both of them glare at me. And you have no right to eavesdrop on us. Eavesdrop? Anyone could have heard you. Their mouths fall open. One of the women looks at me for a long time, then sneers suddenly as if something has occurred to her. I thought you looked familiar. You're the crown princess's personal maid. I see you always following her around when she's in town. This is none of your business, girl. Why do you care so much for our opinions? Ah, perhaps it's because the girl idolizes the queen. Thinks she might also go from rags to riches. What? Oh, you do have a point. They stand in advance toward me. Do you want the prince for yourself, girl? If a commoner can become the queen, it's not too difficult to imagine yourself as a princess, is it? How foolish. You're better off dreaming smaller dreams, girl. Please tell me that I don't care how kind Lucette gets. I do not care how kind Lucette gets. That after she returns back to being a princess, she gets back at these two. Somehow. Because, wow. I hate people like this. They laugh, and the irritation in my chest blazes into full-on anger. Is this what Ophelia has been dealing with for the past year? She is being treated so cruelly when she has done nothing but love the king. And I also ridiculed her, just like this. I forced myself to look at the cruel women as I moved my hand to the pendant hanging around my neck. I was just as cruel as them. I barely feel Viorica's hand as she rested against my shoulder. Lucette, let it go. Her Majesty wouldn't want you to do this. But I cannot just let these two women talk about Ophelia like this. The pull away from Veorica and stand firm. The queen has a good heart. She is far more noble than either of you could ever hope to be. I think back on the times I was cruel to her. Ophelia could have easily reprimanded me for my behavior. She had that right as my stepmother, yet she has been nothing but kind to me. Ophelia never got angry at me, even despite my treatment toward her and her family. I kind of agree and disagree with this. Yes, as her stepmother, she could have been a lot worse. She could have demanded things and pushed more things. So Ophelia has some points there for trying to give Lucette some distance and kindness, but at the same time, she was still deciding already that Lucette was part of her family. And I kind of feel like if you really want to be a family, everyone needs to give that consent. So even if you consider that person to be your daughter, they don't have to consider you to be their mother. And you shouldn't be pushing that narrative until, they're ready, if that makes sense. She has always treated others with kindness, even when they were cruel to her. Judging from the bitterness in your accusations, it seems like you are jealous of her. How pathetic. The other one marches towards me, and my free hand instinctively moves to hold her hand just before her palm reaches my cheek. I will not tolerate any insults toward the queen. A soft light emanates from the pendant, and I can only stare at it in shock. I got another good deed? By defending Ophelia? The woman snatches her hand away. How dare a peasant like you talk that way to us? Have you no manners? I could ask you the same. What happened to yours? How dare you? Don't you know who we are, girl? No, and she wouldn't care. I will see you pay for your impertinence. Our words have far more weight than yours ever will. I will go to the king myself to tell him about how rude you were. I can pass on that message myself. I turn and see Rod walking towards us, his expression cold. The two noblewomen hastily curtsy. Your Highness! The noblewomen turn pale as Rod's eyes fall on them. Actually, we have an important dinner engagement. Yes, we do. The two noblewomen curtsy before quickly departing. Yeah. What are you doing here without your guards? What trouble have you gotten yourself into now? Oh, uh-oh. In this case, he wouldn't believe her, would he? I guess at this point he might. I'm gonna go with not tell him because it feels too much like if she tells him, it's like bragging. It is nothing. If you refuse to tell me what happened, I will have to assume that the noblewomen were telling the truth about you. Lucette has done nothing wrong. In fact, I think Lucette only did what you or Emmeline would have done had you heard the awful things those women were saying about your mother. What? She stood up for the queen when she didn't have to. Then why didn't you just say so? Would you have believed me? Rod drops his gaze from mine. You never gave me a chance to believe you, did you? He would have believed me? How am I to know that? Rod is like a walking contradiction. That's what I was wondering. I legitimately was like, he might believe her, but he might not because it's also kind of like bragging? Rod glances up, this time to look at Veorica. We shouldn't keep you from returning home, Veorica. I'll take Lucette back to the palace. Veorica's eyes narrow and she looks ready to say something, but Rod has already reached out for my hand to pull me along behind him. When we are out of sight of Veorica's shop, Rod stops, releasing my hand as he turns to face me. Did you really think I would refuse to believe you if you told me the truth? You never liked me. You have no reason to believe me. Rod sighs, running a hand through his hair. I told you that I would help you break your curse, right? That offer alone should be enough for you to know that I... Rod turns away, suddenly looking embarrassed. Oh, hey, cool. That I don't dislike you anymore. You're expecting me to just assume that? How would I know unless you made that absolutely clear? Well, I'm making it clear now. I understand. Anyway, thank you for standing up for my mother. It seems like you don't require my assistance in breaking your curse after all. He gestures to my necklace. Congratulations on your second good deed, Lucette. Oh, he smiled. Suddenly tongue-tied, I find myself looking everywhere but at Rod. When I have once again gathered my senses, I turn to the road. My eyes narrow as I recognize the path we are on. Real quick, I like this background a lot. I like these windows and these buildings. They're so pretty. Anyway, sorry, ADHD. This is not the way back to the palace. No, it isn't. We're going to the march-in. Why? Because I was on my way there Because I was on my way there before I was forced to take a detour because someone was drawing attention to herself. What? But Rod ignores me, and we walk the rest of the way to the march-in in silence. Waltz is the only person in the reception room when we enter. Prince Rod? Princess? It's a little late for the two of you to be here. I had meant to be here earlier. Is Lady Parfait here? Parfait, excuse me. Waltz nods. Lady Parfait. I'll go get her. Wait here. As soon as Waltz leaves us alone, Rod turns to me, his expression rigid. Rod steps closer and grabs my shoulders. Uh-oh. I wasn't able to say so earlier because we were out in public, but you should know just how much danger you're in right now, and yet you thought it was okay to go around on your own? It was my day off today. It is not unreasonable for me to want time for myself. Time to yourself? Don't you understand the meaning of be careful? Why would you do something so foolish as going around town alone? Nah. I cannot help but bristle at his tone. Why are you so angry? Because you're... Rod trails off and looks away. Because you're family. So you're finally acknowledging me as family? I notice his cheeks turning red. To be honest, you're less of a family member and more just important. Oh, important? Because of all that you do for... sure. You're important to my sister. He looks uncomfortable as he says the words, and I can help but marvel at his embarrassment. Why is he so embarrassed? Barad changes the topic as he turns away from me. Why were you with Viorica? I can only think of one reason you'd speak to her. My curse. You thought you'd find out about my curse through her. I shrug. Can only assume that your curse has something to do with Viorica. I look at when Rod says nothing, then stare at the curious sight before me. He has taken Sebi off his shoulder and is holding the doll in his hands away from his face. The two seem to be engaged in some silent conversation, then gently Sebi speaks words I can hear. This is the right thing to do. You need to let her help you, Rod. Rod bites down his lower lip before briefly closing his eyes. Eventually, he returns Sebi to his usual spot on his shoulder and turns to me. Fine. You're stubborn and you're not going to quit investigating unless I tell you, are you? You're right. Viorica is the reason I was cursed. Rod sits down on the settee and lets out a heavy sigh. His eyes are far away as he speaks to me. I was in love with Viorica, but I wasn't brave enough to tell her. I just followed her around like some kind of puppy. One day, Viorica hadn't come home and it was raining very heavily, so I went out to look for her. I found her walking along the bank of the river. I called out to tell her to be careful, but I don't think she ever heard me. She slipped and... Rod swallows. He clenches one of his hands into a fist. She fell into the river. I dived in after her. I somehow managed to get both of us onto the riverbank, but it didn't look like Viorica was breathing. I didn't know what to do. I started panicking. I ran off to try and find help, but I couldn't find anyone in the storm. When I returned, she was gone. I rushed to her house, and a doctor was already there tending to her along with Decimond. So he is the Little Mermaid! I figured it might be something like that. So basically, he saved her from the riverbank, and I guess Decimond did like some kind of CPR on her or something, or he showed up after she had kind of recovered on her own and took full credit. One of the reasons I always hated that story was because, of course, the prince chooses the woman because he thinks the woman has saved him, and the woman just goes along with it because she wants to be queen. And I'm just like, wow, what a horrifying person to do something like that and to start off your whole marriage with a freaking lie. So even if Decimond was the one to do CPR and all that, I would hope he would at least say, I'm not the one that took you out of the river, but I did find you on the riverbank not breathing. And that would be fine. You should never start your marriages on lies, my children. Rod's gaze is vacant as he nods. When Viorica began to fall in love with Decimond, I felt helpless. Did you not tell her that you were the one that saved her? Why would I? Viorica was so happy believing that she and Decimond were fated to be together. I couldn't do that to her. But surely if you told her... Rod interrupts me. I want the people I love to be happy. I don't care if their happiness causes me pain. I'd rather bear that alone instead of bringing down those around me. My chest aches as I watch Rod's face. I never would have guessed that Rod would be so selfless. But that didn't stop me from thinking that I could still make her fall in love with me instead. I decided to become what I thought Viorca wanted most, the Prince Charming of the fairy tales she so adored. And so I asked the witch to turn me into one. She stole my voice in exchange. Only then did I realize that she had inflicted the fairy tale curse upon me, the mermaid's curse. The next day the king turned up at our door, proclaiming that he'd been looking for my mother for years and that he'd never stopped loving her. Hold up. Time out. Hold up. Time out. Time out. Time out. So, it's thanks to Rod here that Lucette's father found their mom because he had, as suspected, wanted to win Viorica back. But then he also stole this home that he essentially tricked everyone into from Lucette because she had been mean to his family. Excuse you, sir? Excuse you? Holy crap. Holy crap. Holy crap, you're the reason that they're in the castle right now. It's your family that the king prefers, because... And you also were fine with the actual princess, the true original birthright princess, who has known that castle to be her home her entire life, and that's it. You were fine with kicking her out because she had been mean to your family. And it turns out that not only are you guys... You wouldn't have even been there to replace her had Rod not made this deal with the witch over Viorica. I'm gonna have to let that settle for a little bit. Honestly, if you could see my face right now, I'm just dumbfounded. Because that was so incredibly selfish. So incredibly selfish. Just... That makes everything you did 10 times worse than what it was. Oh my good gravy. Oh my good gravy. When the king married my mother, I became a prince. It was just as the witch promised. But it didn't matter. I didn't see it when I made the deal with the witch, but I couldn't be blind to it forever. Desmond and Viorica really do love each other. They make each other happy. Nothing I can do will ever change that. Rod, Prince Rod? Oh. Parfait pauses in her tracks when she sees me. Have I interrupted something? No. Rod moves over to Parfait, but he stops to glance back at me. I won't be long. Parfait looks at Rod and then at me, her face puzzled, but she does not say a word as Rod and her leave the room. Holy crap, and what a place to end it on. I'm going to be processing that for a while. Okay. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I am Bacon, and this so far has been Cinderella Phenomenon Rod's Route. Oh boy. If you like the video, feel free to like the video. If you like me, feel free to like, subscribe, comment, all that lovely stuff, and I will see you guys in the next installment of the game I just mentioned. Yeah. Okay, bye-bye.